TV in a minute, so folks from the audience can keep it down. And will you please raise your hand, Mr. Cableman, when I'm ready to go? When you're ready to go with me. So I'm ready for you. Mhm. Good evening, everyone. This is the Board of Education Candidate Forum that is sponsored by the Blair Cluster of Montgomery County Council of PTAs. We are 13 schools in the Down County area of Montgomery County, and a couple of our PTA presidents were very interested in getting the input from our Board of Education candidates in order to educate ourselves about the issues. We have a slightly thin crowd in the audience. However, we will be on the Channel 13, the cable TV station for Tacoma Park, and that will be broadcast a number of times, and we hope that the information we share here will be information to inform the community. Thank you to all of the candidates for the Board of Education general election on November 4th. I will shortly just introduce you, and then I will say shortly what it is that the Board of Education does, for those of you in the audience who aren't exactly sure how and why we vote for our candidates. So I'd like to first introduce Stephen Abrams, who is running for the District 2 seat in Rockville, and he is presently the incumbent of that seat. Chris Barkley is running for the District 4 seat on the Board of Education. He is presently the incumbent in that position, and he is running unopposed. Laura Berthum is running for the District 2 seat in Rockville. So that would be Stephen Abrams and Laura Berthum on the ticket. And we have here Phil Kaufman, who is running for the at-large seat for the Board of Education. And we have Tommy Lee, who is also running for the at-large seat the at-large seat for the Board of Education. The person who is presently in that position is retiring, so neither of them are incumbents in the position. Just a little background: the Board of Education officials serve a 4-year term, and they are not subject to term limits. The members of the Board of Education are 7. 5 are specific to districts, and 2 are at large, and so half come up for election every 2 years. They earn about little more than $18,000 for something that is called a part-time position, but actually takes a heck of a lot of work. And their job is to determine and enforce policies that govern the Montgomery County Public Schools. Some of the responsibilities they have are to appoint the superintendent of schools, who at this point is Jerry Wiest. They initiate, review, and discuss educational issues. They review and submit to the County Council annual capital and operating budgets, and they receive funding from county, state, and federal sources. We will be structuring our discussion and forum with Eric Bond, the moderator, who is from the Tacoma Voice. Thank you, Eric, for doing this for us. And we have solicited a number of questions from the community, which he will present. And if you are in the audience and submitted a question, he may be calling on you to go to the podium and say what your question is, and then we will have an open mic session towards the end. Eric? Thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank all of you at home watching and those of you in the audience watching. I would think that any parent in Montgomery County does not see a higher priority than the education and care of their children. And so the candidates here on the dais with me will be setting policies that will have possibly have a great effect on your child and on your family and on your future. So even though the Board of Education is one of those races that does not get the high profile that other local races get, it is perhaps the most important. The way I'd like to begin this evening is asking each of you to speak for up to 2 minutes to the question of why you feel, what motivates you to run for the Board of Education. Why do you feel that you are the right person to be on this very important board? And there's a two-part question. The second part is, given the very unique budgetary issues that we face right now, what are the most pressing problems that the Board of Education faces, and what are your priorities? So that sounds like a very complicated question, but it's pretty simple. Why are you running? What is it that makes you uniquely qualified? And what are your priorities given the tight budget? Mr. Abrams?
Eric, thank you. I want to thank the Blair Cluster for inviting us all here this evening. I'm delighted to be here. I'm running for a fourth term. I've served 3 terms, none of them consecutive. I keep coming back because I don't know any better. But I do it because I love it. When I first ran, I ran as an outsider, challenging the system when I had young children in the school system. All right? My kids graduated Richard Montgomery in 1995 and 1997. All right? So I'm a good 10 years removed as a parent. All right? But I got engaged about 10 years ago in a noble experiment, and that was the reforms that we started doing, trying to re-engineer what Montgomery County schools were, given our realization of the changes that were occurring in Montgomery County. I like to describe Montgomery County's excellence in the past as being excellence by demographic accident. Our excellence today is excellence by design, hard work, and culture change. A lot of it has to do with the reforms we've initiated during the tenure of a fairly controversial superintendent, who I think, on balance, has done a remarkable job. I'm running again because, having been around as long as I have been, I'd like to see those efforts brought to fruition. And I'm strong enough to challenge your superintendent when he's wrong, and he needs that too. You asked me about the budget priorities in a time, or my priorities given the budget circumstances. I want to protect the gains that we've made, particularly as we've reached out to students who hadn't performed as well, and we spent a great deal of time, money, and effort to bring that about, and I want to make sure that's protected.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barkley?
First of all, it's great to be here. This is home, so I'm from Tacoma Park, so it's nice to see friends and, I should say, family in the audience. Let me just do one thing, if I could, outside of my time. There are 8 members of the Board of Education. We also have a student elected every year by students from the 6th to 12th grade, and they are an integral part of the board. So I wanted to add that. And actually, in fact, that's one of the reasons why I got involved, is because I have 3 children in the system. I have 3 girls. As an African-American parent, I was very concerned about the inconsistencies in performance of African-American students. That's what got me involved in PTA, got me involved in MCC PTA, the Blair Cluster. I used to be a cluster coordinator. I was very involved in nominating leaders into the MCC PTA. But the key was, how in fact can we as parents ensure that all children get a quality education here in Montgomery County? My real concern was to make sure that those great programs that few kids had the opportunity to take advantage of were available to all kids. So it's been a real struggle to ensure that there's some equity and excellence in this system, and I kind of go back to those 2 things as the biggest issues that I'm concerned about. That's part of the why me. Why me? Because I think that any parent who has a child in the system and has the time and the energy to commit to helping other children needs to be supported, needs to be honored. And I don't need to be honored, but what needs to happen is we need to ensure that parents can be heard and that in fact we have a good representation on our board to ensure that there's balance in governing the board and balance in the policies that come out of the board, if you will. Priorities, obviously I'm concerned about the achievement gap. I'm very concerned about the achievement gap. African American and Latino students are making incredible gains in this county. We are far above.
You know, I think that I think I gave too much to cover in 2 minutes.
Okay.
I cut Mr. Abrams off. I'm about to cut you off.
That's good.
So let's come back to the budget question
Okay.
and just start off with you know, discussing,
Why
as you
you-
two have, you know, why you're running.
Okay.
Okay. So, Ms. Bertum.
Okay. Hi, I'm Laura Berthume, and I am the outsider running to challenge the school system this time around. Let me just tell you my view of what's happening with the school system. You know crew, you got the rowers and they're rowing, and the guy's sitting in the back and he's calling stroke, stroke. We've done a great thing over the past decade in Montgomery County, which is we're all rowing more or less in the same direction as a county. And we've had Dr. Wiest in the back going stroke, stroke, stroke. The thing is, we're heading for a waterfall, which is the budget cuts, and we're about to lose the guy who's calling the strokes because he's leaving us in 2 years. And we're also at a point where, although everybody's been rowing, the special ed parents will tell you they've been tossed overboard largely. And we've got other parents who are looking over their shoulders and they're wondering, how did that happen, and will it happen to my child's school? And occasionally, the guy who's doing the stroke, 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 he's missing a couple. And we've got parents who are looking back and saying, wait a minute, there's a problem here. We've sprung a few leaks. We need to fix them. But we've got the answer coming back from the superintendent and the board, oh, you know what, we're right on time. But as we head for that waterfall, we want to make sure as a county we're all still rowing in the same direction and that we don't end up having this county fall to pieces politically with fights over budget cuts. Like Chris said, we want to make sure that all of our children get a good quality education. I'm a parent. I'm going to have a child in this school system for the next 13 years. And I also want to make sure that everybody feels like they get a fair shake and like they get heard. And if there are problems, we're addressing real problems.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaufman?
Hi. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've been a resident of the county for over 20 years, and I've been a PTA activist for over 13 years. I've had 2 children that have gone through the system. My youngest child recently graduated from the county schools, and both children are enrolled in very fine private liberal arts institutions. And I'm quite satisfied with the education that my children have gotten in the school system. I have a wife who's a teacher, and she informs me from the standpoint of teachers and staff and their perspectives on how the system works for them. During my years as a PTA activist, I would say that I was frustrated many times with my dealings with the Board of Education. A lot of times I felt, and with MCPS, I felt that the system didn't respond as well as we would like the system to respond to the views of parents. Oftentimes we felt like parents' views were solicited, but it was just to check the box that the views were solicited, but the system went and did what the system wanted to do without truly valuing parent input and community input. That's something that I would like to change from the board. I'd like to see when the board makes decisions on important issues of policy that it brings in not just people from the Carver system to tell them what they want to hear, but they bring in a wider range of viewpoints from other community stakeholders, from outside experts, so that when decisions are made, the Board of Education has a fuller grasp of the different viewpoints out there. The Board of Education should have things like town hall meetings, just like the county council has, so that the views of the community can be heard directly to board members, so community members can tell the board what's working and what's not. So those
Thank
are
you.
the sorts of changes I'd like to see at the board.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Lee?
Well, thank you. I'm Tommy Lee, and I'm a diversity as a community, as you can tell. I live further in Alaska. I'm from Southeast Asia, so I want to come to the school board and make changes. And the reason, what I'm saying is my children went through kindergarten through high school here in Montgomery County. I've been involved with school for the time since the elementary, PTA, and after they finished high school, I went on and involved myself in Citizen Advisory Board, involved in MCPS, career and technology, put in TV, computer at Lake Forest. You remember all that. Because I work and I know the students need those facilities. So the school and the children is in my heart. And that's the reason I'm running for the board. I'm not going to use it as a springboard for councilman or state councilor or whatever, you know. So I come with the heart. I used to be a buffalo herder for my uncle when I was young. No, barefooted. And here I had the honor sitting near the big bureaucrat, assistant deputy general of Department of Veterans. So it's an honor to have been here, not even winning the board. So, but anyway, this is the country of opportunity. My mother is undereducated, but I had 3 brothers. They all PhD.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off.
And so that's why I'm running for board, making our children better than who we are. And I've been through there, and I want to help our parents to be like one.
Okay. Mr. Lee, I think we'll go to the second part of that first question. We'll start with you. So would you address what you believe are the priorities for the Board of Education for our school system, given the difficult financial situation that we find ourselves in?
Thank you. I came from a so-called minority community too, and sometimes I go to the school and on the behalf of some Vietnamese parent and to talk to the school. And I've been through there, and a lot of counselors told me that our students need to talk out, not to spend time in the classroom. So I propose that we need more school counselor. In addition to that, I'd like to also put in reading courses like your family, love your family, responsibility to the parent and the family and the country. I also would like to make sure that we increase vocational technology. See, the current school board and the MCPS and Dr. Weiss are pushing for IP, IB, or whatever, IBC, you know, and you name it. But they're nothing for minority people like us immigrants who come here. And so that's what I'm pushing for, more vocational education. And I will renegotiate with the union to get the money out because they're the best pay in the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And I'm just, you know, we're trying to get through a lot of questions, so we'll see how it works with 1 minute for responses, but just so you kind of bear that in mind in your answers that I'm giving you.
I'm a product of ESO, so I need more time.
Oh, you're doing great. I don't think. Okay, Mr. Kaufman, would you like to address that question?
Sure. A couple of the priorities I've outlined are focusing on our middle school reform initiative, making sure that, you know, that is a priority of the school system, but I'd like to be part of that. I used to be a PTA president at Farquhar Middle School, so middle schools are sort of near and dear to my heart. We have different models going on that we're comparing, our middle school reform initiative and our magnet school consortium initiative, and I think we need to focus on what's working and figure out the best practices from both of those. And I think we can do that without, you know, being fiscally irresponsible. Parental involvement, I think, is something, you know, the parent academies and all that that the school system adopted last year is a way to engage parents and make parents more active participants in helping their children succeed is a low-cost item. I think that we need to work to foster that particular initiative. The community involvement piece I talked about before in terms of town hall meetings, that shouldn't be a high-budget item. And testing, I think, is something we need to cut back on, and that shouldn't cost money to do less testing.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Bertum?
Thank you. Thank you. Let me say that I think that I'm going to talk about just specifically budget because there's lots of priorities that I have for the school system, but in terms of budget cuts, I want to talk about principles first, and that is this. I have my ideas. I'm sure you all have yours. The point is that everybody should be able to participate in that process. That's principle number one. Principle number two is everybody in this county needs to share a little bit in the resulting pain from the superintendent down to the school board and the staff. If we're going to ask our teachers to take a cut, and I think we all kind of foresee that coming, then I'm certainly willing to take a cut in the salary that I would get, and I would expect our superintendent to voluntarily take an equivalent cut in his salary. If we're not in it together, we're going to be divided. My priorities, I would like to protect what we've done about the achievement gap, and class size is very important to me.
Thank you. Mr. Barclay?
60 seconds, huh?
Yeah, we may have to revisit this, but
That's okay. Middle school reform, one of the most important things we do. Middle school is the wasteland, has been the wasteland of education in Montgomery County, and not just here, but around the nation. One of the biggest things is that our kids go through elementary school, they do a great job, they make all of these achievements, and all of a sudden they get in middle school, and kids who could read at 5th grade levels when they left 5th grade are reading at 4th grade levels when they get to 7th grade. One of the things also is what we've done in this county in terms of individualized education, really putting technology in the classroom and ensuring that, in fact, we can get to what are the issues for the individual student to help them achieve. I'm trying to be really fast. I know I have no time. The other issue is career technology education. I know that Mr. Kaufman and other folks have spoken to this, but it's really important to look at children who are not going to go to college and, in fact, give them a pathway to get to their career and give them a quality education that ensures that they'll be able to do really well when they leave. So those are the biggest things: middle school reform, career technology education. What else did I miss? Individualized education, and of course all of that will include the achievement gap.
Very good.
Thanks. I'm working on it.
Mr. Abrams?
Mrs. Cox and I took a great deal of criticism for not supporting the contract 2 years ago. And we voted against that contract because we didn't think the county could afford it based on projections that were out there. Turns out we were right. So that's going to resolve itself in part, but it's only step one. The area that I want to see us focus on is working smarter, not harder, eliminating programs that don't work and haven't yielded results. HSAs.
Yes, sir.
The HSAs have got to be changed or eliminated. I'm now on the board of directors of the Maryland Association Boards of Education. I'm working with them on developing certification testing as an alternative to the HSAs, which incentivizes the exams and kids actually get something usable out of it and addresses both academic as well as vocational training.
Okay, thank you. And we will return to this issue, I'm sure, and I'll give you all a little bit more time as we move forward.
90 seconds.
Yeah, we'll move to 90.
What? The high school assessment tests that come from the state of Maryland that we objected to a long time ago. We're in a big fight with the state superintendent, who has, unfortunately, a very heavy ownership interest in this specific structure that's been used, and we've had a lot of problems with it.
Great. Thank you very much. We have some questions that were submitted by community members here, and some of them are in the audience and some are not. We're not able to make it, so let me ask if Brenda Platt is here in the audience. And why don't we start with Mr. Barkley, and we'll just kind of work around, yeah.
They shortened my question, okay. But it's basically the same question. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask it. We are concerned about our children's nutrition and physical fitness. How do you propose to improve our children's health? And that means more PE time, better nutrition in the school lunches, in the curriculum, school gardens, things like that. We'd like to see more.
Thank you for the question. A couple different things. How much time do I have? 60 seconds?
90 seconds.
90 seconds, all right.
You just used half of it.
I know. That didn't count when I asked, right? A couple of different things. One, we just had a presentation yesterday at the board meeting about, in fact, physical education, music, and art. I can't say that I was satisfied with the presentation, but I think it was important for us to have a beginning step. Relative to physical education, I think the first thing that everybody deals with is time. There really is no room right now, and folks have not figured out ways to add more time to the day. Time is money. So we may not be able to do that in terms of adding more time, but there may be creative ways for our teachers to really look at what can they do to get their students moving and more active in the classrooms. Okay. Another thing is, and I'm really concerned about this, is the partnership between county agencies, the Recreation Department and the Board of Education, or the school system, I should say. I think it's really important for us to leverage the relationship between those agencies and really help figure out ways that we can work together and get folks involved in, and it's not folks, our children, involved in activities before or after school to ensure that we do have some more time to be active. Relative to school lunches or nutrition, one of the things that's happened in the last month, tell me how I'm doing on time, was that we dealt with homegrown lunches or homegrown meals. So we were looking at the legislation that Jamie Raskin and Jane Lawton, the late Jane Lawton,
15 seconds.
All right, dealt with, which was to bring in produce from Maryland into our schools. Another issue is to, in fact, offer some more creative and nutritious meals, and I think that Kathy Laser in our food services is doing a good job at trying to introduce some of those. So I think those are some of the ways that we can make that happen.
Very good.
I'm going to try to speak at Chris's pace because I might actually get it in. Let me start with exercise, and the answer I have there is testing. Because if we don't test it, we don't teach it. And what's happened is that as we've tried to comply with No Child Left Behind, what has gotten pushed aside is music, art, and physical education. I think the answer is less testing, more education, and let's go back to a sane school day for all of our children to the extent that we can in compliance with federal law, and let's advocate for changes in the federal law so that we can make sure that our kids don't just test well and end up with diabetes at age 12 or heart attacks at age 30. Nutrition, I agree. I think the community gardens idea is fantastic. Let me just tell you, my child, of course, eats school lunch, and I managed to get Council President Mike Knapp out to my school, and I made sure I got him there on a meatloaf day. So he had to eat the meatloaf. Right? We can do better. I appreciate that we are trying to get more healthful options on the menu, but more fresh fruits and vegetables is key.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Well, I don't want to be too redundant, but I guess I will have to be redundant. You know, the issue with physical exercise is really one, like Laura said, it comes down to, you know, what are our expectations in terms of testing, and since we test for math and reading, there is increased focus on math and reading, and more time is spent teaching that, and that comes at the expense of music, art, and PE, and all those other whole life skills that are important to the education of children. We need to set guidelines and set standards. Even though we have those No Child Left Behind benchmarks, we need to still set minimum floors for our schools to say it's unacceptable for the principal to just say, well, we're going to cut out PE from the school day or recess or whatever because children need to spend more time in reading instruction, math instruction. There are other ways they can be learning those life skills through better use of the curriculum in music, art, and PE to reinforce those cognitive practices that reinforce math and reading skills, and we don't need to be cutting those things out. In terms of nutrition, my wife's a dietitian, and I can assure you she's not happy with what she sees in terms of the lunch programs and all at the high school where she teaches. Once again, we need to set clear guidelines in terms of what is acceptable and what is not in terms of good nutrition practices in the meals that we serve our students.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lee?
Thank you. Well, I think the children need to be nurtured in both spiritual and physical. So I think physical education is a must part. We don't need any procedure or anything. It's up to the class. In China, they don't have no procedure, but they live to 90 years old. Now, what I'm saying here is it depends on the teacher, initiative, and also the know-how to get the children to motivate themselves. Now, the other day, I was in one of the school, and I saw the public speaker, and I talked to the school counselor. Hey, why don't you use that speaker to tell everybody, every half an hour, you announce to the school, say, all stand up and breathe and exercise. It's like in China, give them about 5 minutes. And everybody doing that. It doesn't take much time. And the other thing to help the mind is that I would select some student and, in the evening, they talk about the story of how Jefferson became president or how Edison discovered electricity. And those take about 3 minutes on the speaker, and the entire student can learn a good lesson and become a better person. Now, back to vocational and technology. I was pushing for that back in '85 at Edison Career Center. I remember the principal, Dr. Sweeney, and we always sit down and say how we brought this good program at Edison to up county, down county, east and west, and get our immigrant student and student with low income to get in there, because not all can go to Harvard or Columbia. They need a job after that, and then when the job is stable, they can go on to study, and education is limited. The other day, the lady, 65-year-old, graduated from college. What's wrong with that? We don't need a lawyer to come in and tell us how to do math, by the way.
You got to work this, Eric, man.
I know. I guess
You're going to have to grab hold, buddy.
All right. Mr. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Bond.
Hey, I need ESOL. I need to practice.
Right.
First of all, folks, I would love to be able to tell you of grandiose plans I have of changing federal and state legislation, all right? But I don't think I'm going to be able to accomplish that sitting on the Montgomery County School Board alone. So I want to look at small steps that are within our power. One of the things I'd like to see us do is to experiment at some elementary schools on a voluntary basis on structured recess. And I know this is a debate that's gone back and forth as to whether that time should be used as part of promoting a physical education agenda, or if that is needed as a release. I'm not going to suggest we do it any place where a school doesn't agree and the parents in that school don't agree to do it. But I'd love to be able to get the metrics on it to find out if, in fact, that does make a difference. If it does, it's something within our power that we could do if we have the will to do it and can develop that kind of consensus. I applaud what Jamie Raskin is doing in terms of trying to introduce more variety, but all of us are going to have to work both at home as well as in the school to make it clear to kids that it's not only tastes good, but it's good, it's not only good for them, but it tastes good, and they make those kinds of choices. The integration of the arts into other curriculum is something we talk a great deal about. I'm hopeful that with the introduction of the Promethean boards and multimedia into the content of curriculum, that we'll be able to extend out into arts and music as part of other curriculum and integrate it and deliver it that way.
Thank you very much. So I will try to be tougher about time, and if I
Why do you
say...
always start with me when you do that?
Well, I gave you a little bit of extra time. If I say time, you have until the end of your sentence, and try not to make it a one-page sentence. Ms. Berthume, I think we'll start with you next, and I'm wondering if Vladimiro Dueñas is here in the audience? Okay, so we have a question from the Blair Cluster Coordinator, Vladimiro Dueñas. What do you think are the main causes of the achievement gap, and how do you propose to address them?
I think that the main causes of the achievement gap are the society that we live in. Montgomery County, I believe, has a farms rate of approximately 40%, farms being free and reduced meals, which we use as a marker for poverty, children living in poverty. And children living in poverty do not have the resources from pre-birth on through to come into school on the same footing with more privileged children. So we would talk about prenatal care, good child care, good health care. Those are all areas where our society is failing our children. Now, I think that it is our responsibility as a school system to do what we can to address those gaps. And I think that we have done a good job with targeted reduced class sizes in the focus school areas to bring those resources into classrooms that have children who are in need of the catch-up that we do. You know, other children come in and they know their letters, they know their shapes, and they know their colors. They know how to line up and how to sit at a table. When you've got an immigrant family that's working very hard and that has two parents that are working, they don't have the time or the resources to send their child to preschool. Ultimately, I would love to see universal preschool come into our system. I think we really need it.
Great. Mr. Kaufman, would you like to address the achievement gap?
Sure. I'll agree with much of what Laura has just said in terms of the achievement gap. I think stems from poverty issues and the deficits that these children come into the system with. I think a lot of, we contribute as a society by having low expectations for minority children, and I think we have to make sure that our staff in the schools do not have those expectations, do not look at a child's skin color and make any assumptions as to what that child is capable of and not capable of. So I think we need to focus on that. A lot of that has to do with the professional development we provide our staff to make sure that they don't have those lower expectations for minority children. I think we also need to look at the curriculum and how we deliver our curriculum in our schools. Right now, I think our curriculum doesn't focus as much as I would like to see on basics at the lower grades, and relies a whole lot on material to be delivered at home, and I think that contributes to the achievement gap from the standpoint that wealthier middle-class families have the resources and the time to provide the extra tutoring, the extra instruction at home that poor families don't. I think we need to make sure that our curriculum is solid in delivering the basics in the early grades and
Thank you.
critical reading, critical thinking skills in the higher grades.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lee.
Thank you. Well, I think this so-called the gap between the student, I agree partially because of poverty and economic level. However, I think, like Bill Cosby say, it's a parent at home that should reinforce the homework. While the teacher in the daytime gives them what to do, that should be enforced at home. And that is the reason. Now, from poverty, nobody knows poverty like myself. I used to live in a house equivalent to Baptist boy house in D.C. My father died in the war, and my mother had to do errand on the road. And so I had to live in a public house, And so the drive of the teacher, the motivation, not challenge the children, but to aspire them, to motivate them with a story and all that in the class. And that's why I call for innovation teaching in the school. And we need to root out some of the so-called bad teacher. You know, a bad surgeon can hurt only one person, but a bad teacher, we hurt a whole bunch of our children. And that's what the union need to be at. You know, we pay the teacher the same way. That's why all these bad teachers are hanging around to get all that good pay. We have to pay with performance, and that's what I'm going to ask for. In my campaign, I would say I have money reserved to reward teachers who do good.
Mr. Abrams?
Chris and I are going to let you in on a little secret. Montgomery County Public Schools are probably making more advancements in closing the achievement gap than any other public school system of our size in the country. All right? And we're not satisfied. The way we were able to make the gains that we did up to this point is the old-fashioned way. We put resources behind programs that worked in targeted areas, and we've had this community consent to allow us to do this. The big challenge we're going to have in this budget is to maintain that equilibrium to allow us to continue doing it. I would love to solve every social ill through the school system, all right? But I don't think we can. But what we can do is take the lessons we've learned and continue them. Expectation is a huge contributing factor. The cultural change, people may not like everything that Jerry Wiest has done, all right? But his legacy is going to be the change in the culture of the institution of Montgomery County Public Schools that recognizes that every kid can learn when given the opportunity, given the proper attention, and given the proper foundation.
Thank you.
Wow. A couple of different things, and I guess I'm going to have to stick with Steve on this one because he's right. One of the issues is the fact that we did have targeted resources going to our focus schools has made a tremendous difference. Now, how do we deal with the fact that after 3rd and 4th grade, we start to see that gap open up again? Well, again, I go back to middle school reform, and we go back to the issue of expectations. What are we doing in middle school? So I'm going to address an area that folks don't deal with a lot, which is how are we dealing with kids of color in terms of how are we relating to kids of color in the classroom, in the hallways, on the streets? You know, one of those things, all of those things have to be dealt with in us talking about it. Now, one of the ways to do that is Dr. Wiest has said, and I'm not necessarily on his bandwagon on this, but I do agree, is putting race on the table. We've got to address the issue of how are we dealing with race in general. How are folks looking at each other? And that dialogue is going on right now because we're in this fantastic presidential race, and we've got an African-American candidate running, and folks are facing the reality of will I or will I not vote for an African-American candidate if I'm a Democrat or if I support his policies. But I think the issue of expectations, the issue of how are we in fact focusing on areas of need and ensuring that they have the resources is what's really going to do it. I think the other issue, and it's great to see you in the audience, Tom, is affordable universal pre-K. If we do not do that, we will still be back at this table with the next candidates for board talking about the same thing. We have to get our kids prepared before they get to the schoolhouse.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to another question. This is from a 5th grade parent at Piney Branch Elementary School. John Lickerman, are you here in the audience? Okay.
Hello, I'm actually a stand-in for Adrian Tilton, who is PTA president with Piney Branch
I can't
Elementary.
hear you, sir.
Oh, sorry. Hello? Hi, I'm a stand-in for Adrian Tilton, the PTA president of Piney Branch Elementary, who unfortunately is home with a sick child. My question is twofold. How would you take the pulse of parents' needs and concerns and actively represent your constituency? And as a part of that, how will you engage with parents on a regular basis throughout your term? Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with Mr. Kaufman. How do you actively represent, or how will you actively represent your constituency? How will you engage with parents on a regular basis?
Well, as I've indicated before, I think this is one of my focuses, is increasing the amount of community involvement, and the way we get community involvement, I think the Board of Education should be having regular town hall meetings. The county council has regular town hall meetings. The county executive has town hall meetings. Members of our state delegations periodically go around in the community and have town hall meetings. And town hall meetings, to me, are one of the best venues for interested citizens who want to express their opinion of what's working and what's not working, to have an opportunity to speak in an unrestricted fashion directly to their elected representatives and tell them what they think is working. And in many senses, it's going to be what they think is not working. But right now, we really, it's sort of insulated that the average citizen doesn't have that same opportunity. When the superintendent first came to Montgomery County Public Schools, he instituted these sorts of meetings. He went around the county to hear from citizens and parents as to what was working at the schools. And I remember I went to one of those meetings. That was a good format. Our superintendent hasn't done that. But I think the Board of Education certainly has it within its power to do that, and that's one of my priorities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee, how do you actively represent your constituency, and how will you engage parents on a regular basis?
Thank you. I think the school board member actually working for the community, and the community put the school board there to represent the children, to get money from local and state and federal to educate our children. Now, during the primary, while my high-paid person here spent $20,000 to campaign, I spent $20. And one of my campaign was a student at Blair High School. And she asked me, what do I do to communicate with community? And I say, well, I will use my stipend to hire at least 3 students from different districts in the county and work for me and man a phone line. I'm going to set up a phone line directly so people who have money go to community meeting with the bureaucrat here. I have a phone line for people who work at midnight, come home, and have no time to community hall meeting, and they can call me on the phone and leave a message. And these 3 students that I use to inform scholarship will collect all the data and give me what the community concern is. And I will, in turn, have a website answer every question myself. And that I plan, and that's how I communicate with the Blair student. I don't know whether she put in a newspaper at Blair High School or not, but that was my plan. Now, as far as the community concerned...
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Abrams?
At my age, I'm going to give you a different answer. Grandparents. The reason I say that is because I'm now older. My contemporaries no longer have kids in the school system. We've been there, we've done that. When my kids were in school, I had phenomenal networks of people who were active there, and I'd hear it in that circle. So how do I get it now? I get it from the grandparents, who are my contemporaries, who are telling me what their grandkids are experiencing through it. Folks, there are 140,000 kids in this school system, all right? We've got 200 schools, all right? We have a part-time Board of Education. Any one of us who stands up here and makes you grand promises of how we're going to be in touch is selling you something, all right? I can tell you what I've done over the years. I have a network of people that I've gotten to know over years. I hear things. I get called on things. I get pointed out things from within the system. We have mechanisms for testimony that comes forward, and we discern as we listen through that, all right? None of us are going to be completely in touch. All of us are going to be focused problem solvers on an issue that bubbles up, all right? hopefully all of us are smart enough that when we see something egregious, we take the bull by the hands and try to do something. I did that with the media center at Maryville Elementary School. I would think my colleagues on the board probably do the same thing.
Mr. Barclay?
Wow. Okay, a couple things. I feel like I always have to talk fast because there's a lot to be said and not a lot of time. There are already existing structures that need to be better utilized. The fact is there are not town hall meetings, but we have cluster meetings. So every cluster, and Blair Cluster has done this, have the opportunity to, in fact, have the board, not the opportunity, but the obligation to have the board in. You decide the location, you decide the format of the meeting, and that's where we can have that conversation so that we can find out, the board can find out from the Blair Cluster or Watkins Mill or whatever, what is going on in that community. The issue is how well are those meetings run, and who's at the meeting, and who's in the PTA. So there is another thing that the board can't take responsibility for, but I did take responsibility for when I was a cluster coordinator and a PTA rep and a PTA person, was to diversify the PTA and really help to make sure that we didn't just see the same faces and kind of see this homogeny of folks representing, you know, what are very diverse areas. So I think those are some of the issues that have to be dealt with. Another issue is it's tomorrow night we'll have our strategic planning forum. This current board has really tried hard to create meetings where, in fact, we can hear from parents. So I think it's important to recognize what we have done is we've really tried to open it up, and we'll have, I don't know how many people testifying, you know, 30, 40, 50 it may be, but it'll be an opportunity for folks to come forward and talk about whatever issues it is that they wish to talk about, things that are going well, things that may not be going well. But again, it's that opportunity to do that, and it's just one of many. The other issue is, and I think nobody has said this, is we need student meetings. We need to be talking to our students. They are truly our customers.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Ms. Berthum?
I would say to Adrian, thank you for that question, because it really goes to the heart of the difference between myself and Mr. Abrams. You don't know if you don't go. And talking about cluster meetings, Mr. Abrams has been largely absent from those. The strategic planning forum up at Watkins Mill, Mr. Abrams was not at that table to hear those parents. It is not grandiose to say that we need to be listening to our parents and our students. Matt Reese is here tonight. He's the head of the student government PAC. And back in the spring, I asked him, I said, so Matt, you know, how's Mr. Carrasco at Richard Montgomery? And he said, you know, he presents a very different image to the students than to the parents. I don't think he's that great. Today we learned Mr. Carrasco was using $10,000 in student funds to attend a luxury resort. You don't know if you don't go, and you also don't know if you don't provide adequate opportunities to hear. I would do town hall meetings. I would also do real and significant oversight. We give our parents the opportunity to come in and testify on the operating budget and on the capital budget. We need to have oversight hearings where we're giving our parents the opportunity to come in and testify about our math curriculum, which is an issue that's out there. And I don't know if it's bubbling up to the grandparents, but I can tell you parents countywide are concerned about the math curriculum.
Okay, we are rapidly running out of time, believe it or not. So that is why these questions, I'm not giving you as much time as you would all like. I think we'll go with one more of the prepared questions, and then we'll go to the audience. We have a question from Melissa Bannett. Are you here in the audience? Am I mispronouncing? Melissa Bannett. She has two 10-year-old twins at Sligo Creek Elementary School and a 12-year-old son at Silver Spring Middle School. Her question is this: as a parent of 3 elementary and middle school students in Montgomery County Public Schools, I've become increasingly concerned that the school system is teaching to the test with a focus on reading and mathematics and not developing the whole child with a broader curriculum. What do you think should be the basis of the core curriculum? And what, if anything, would you reform about the Montgomery County Public School curriculum? So we'll start with you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. Well, the purpose of the classroom is for the teacher to deliver material and learning material information to the student. Now, the absorption rate of different students It depends on his or her interest on the subject. And therefore, it depends on the motivation and aspiration of the teacher in the class. So I would say that we need to motivate and not challenge our students in such a way that they become bored. What's the other part, sir?
They're teaching to the test. Our,
Okay.
The
And
Kansas
so-
system is teaching to the test with a
and
focus
so
on reading
in-
and mathematics.
Thank you. In order for the teacher to get feedback from the student, you not necessarily have a long test, but have a quiz now and then just to test and see if the absorption rate is there with the student now. And during this process, you detect who are not absorbing, and that way the teacher take note and help these weaker students to do that. And that's the purpose of the test. I don't favor teach the test a professional test taker, but there needs to be some feedback of student, and it's going to be done in an informal way and in a nice way.
Okay, and I'm going to change things up a little bit here and ask Mr. Kaufman how you would respond to this.
Well, I think we've discussed earlier that I think we need to focus on the other skills like art, music, PE, and not just focus all of our instruction on reading and math, because those are the things that get tested under and get reported on under No Child Left Behind. So, we need to make sure that those other subjects are not edged out. And I think that in schools where we have many more at-risk children of not meeting proficiency targets for No Child Left Behind, that is the risk we run, that the principals are going to take the time away from those other disciplines. I think that we can use the proper instruction in those disciplines to also reinforce math and reading skills. But the question is absolutely correct. There is too much teaching to the test. I mean, we've gotten to the point where schools have turned into a place where kids think they come to take a test, and we've got to change some of that. Certainly there are tests that are required by the state, standardized tests, and we do need the data from testing to drive some of our instruction. That certainly is an initiative that Jerry Wiest has put in. But even our teachers are complaining that that they can't collate all the data that they're getting, that there's just too much time is spent on testing, and it's taking away time from good teaching.
Okay, and then thank you very much. And I think we'll move to Ms. Berthum, and then Mr. Abrams, and then finally Mr. Barkley.
I'm really switching it around here. Let me come back to, I agree completely with the question. I think that we are going to have a national opportunity to have a discussion about testing and teaching to the test. I think that there is a bipartisan appetite in Congress to look carefully at No Child Left Behind and redo it. After all, Utah wanted to opt out. If Utah wanted to opt out, you know that we've got things to solve when it comes to testing and teaching to the test. I think we can still do accountability and hold our school systems accountable while reforming No Child Left Behind. And as one of the largest school systems in the country, we should have a loud voice in that process. So I do think we are going to have that opportunity. Let me come back to the math curriculum, because I think that's one area that is screaming out for attention. We are pushing kids so far, so fast in math. They're not mastering the basics. We want 80% of our kids in algebra by 8th grade. They get there and they can't do the fractions. We're not giving them the time, the materials, and the attention to master what they need to master. Math builds on itself like no other subject. You have got to get the basics down, or you will not be able to do algebra, which is the gateway course to higher math. But you've got to get the fundamentals, and that is one thing I would want to hear from our teachers and our students about how we do that well. An oversight hearing would come in very handy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Abrams?
Until you do a follow-up study of Montgomery County public school graduates who go on to college and how well prepared they are in math, I think it's a little bit misleading to suggest that the course that we've been pursuing to this date doesn't work. Every indication that I have, it goes to the contrary on that. I challenge the question a little bit because it seems that there are two different concepts that are being merged. First of all, I agree we should not be teaching to the test. I believe we ought to be testing on what we teach, which is why we've spent a great deal of time trying to align curriculum to the all of the instruments through. It's nice to talk about Leave No Child Behind. Talk to me about Leave Nancy Grasmick Behind, because Nancy Grasmick is the one that is imposing a worthless test at the state level that all of those reforms in Congress won't do a thing about. All right? The challenge that I have for you, however, is the assumption that you can't integrate music, art, etc., into a well-rounded curriculum. All right? Secondly, I challenge you on certification testing. If a kid finds an incentivized test that they get something out of, whether that's cosmetology or an AP exam, but they are able to accumulate the points towards a demonstration of competency, you make your testing more relevant.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley?
Do I really have to say anything?
You do not have to say anything.
All right, I'll be quick. I'm sorry. There are a couple of different things. I think everybody has said it. Nobody wants to be teaching to the test. That's an easy one. It's kind of pro forma. I think the issue is, are we in fact doing what we need to ensure that our children are mastering the subjects that they're being taught? So, one, what are we doing to ensure that there are multiple ways to assess how well our children are doing, which also should be telling us how well our teachers are teaching. That's one thing that I think we have to look at and be more creative about. And I think that Mr. Abrams has hit kind of some of the things, and I think folks have to address this. Much of the testing that is unfortunately being done is being forced on us by the state. It's not necessarily just Montgomery County saying, well, you know, we're going to just load on 80,000 tests onto our kids, but we have this requirement from the State Board of Education and the state system that's telling us that we have to do all of these tests. So we've got to address that, and there are some issues politically that we're going to be able to deal with and kind of push. But the main thing for me is, how do we, in fact, really know that our children have mastered whatever subject they're being taught? That's what concerns me, because I think you can assess that in many ways. You can have a bubble test and try and do it, or you can have folks that do things that are project-based. But I think the issue of assessing and understanding if our children are really getting the subject is critical. So on the one hand, I agree we shouldn't teach to the test. I'd like to test less, but I do want to make sure that our children are mastering the subjects that they're being taught.
Thank you. I have more questions here. We're not going to get to all of them. I'm wondering if you all might agree to answer some of these questions via email, and we'll get them up on some local websites, Tacoma.com for sure after October 24th, and possibly Susan Fleck would be able to get them up on the Blair website. At this point, I'd like to turn to...
We'll try to put them on the Blair High School PTSA website.
Great. We'd like to turn to the audience and ask if there's anybody here in attendance who would like to ask a concise and precise question.
Sure. Yes. My name is Ann Levesque. I've been a Montgomery County Public School parent since 1994. I currently have 2 children at Tacoma Park Middle School. I'd like you to address, given that the Constitution of the State of Maryland ensures a free education, and given that there is an Attorney General opinion of more than 20 years standing that interprets this to mean that school fees, curricular fees, are illegal, please address the issue of school fees.
Okay. Mr. Abrams, why don't you begin?
We are currently doing an assessment on that, because I think there is some misunderstanding on the issue. You're right in what you've stated, all right? The issue is beyond curriculum and fees. And the Attorney General has not ruled out fees of a non-curriculum nature. Secondly, they have not ruled out fees in circumstances where it supplements the material for convenience as opposed to access. That's the legal response to it. Now, let's talk a little bit realistically. We're looking at a $250 million budgetary shortfall, all right? I think the issue is ultimately going to come down what we're going to be able to offer and what we're not going to be able to offer. All right? It's possible that some programs may be kept on a fee structure. All right? And it's going to be real interesting to see how the state responds and how the Attorney General responds to that proposition, provided appropriate safeguards are placed in it to make sure that no student is denied on an ability to pay basis. But the issue that you're posing is not as clear-cut as a legal issue as people would like to project it. If it were, that action would have already been brought to court, and the proponents of it have failed to do that.
Okay, thank you. Can I go with Ms. Berthum?
Sure.
No, I'm skipping over Chris on purpose.
Okay.
We're trying to keep the...
All right. So that didn't count towards my time, right?
No.
Okay. School fees. Let me say, first off, that I think that we owe it to our students to be in compliance with the law. As speaking as an attorney who's dedicated to the prospect of the idea that we all need to be in compliance with the law, let's start with that. But I want to come back to the question of oversight, because what I think has happened is that as we've been facing budget cuts, what we've been sneaking in is these fees as a way to get money into our system, and it's never really been vetted, and it hasn't been uniform. You might be paying a fee at Quince Orchard, but not at Richard Montgomery. That's a problem. We have a unified one-county school system. Everybody should be on the same fee schedule, and we may need to go and say, all right, we can't afford this or that. We need to handle that through the regular budget process. I used to live in Virginia. We had a car tax. Everybody hated that car tax. And you know why? It was, you had to go write a check, and you never knew quite what it was going to be. It hit you at the bad time of year, and it was minuscule compared to the income tax, but that car tax irritated everybody in Virginia. This is the same sort of thing. When you're asking parents who are trying to get their kids educated to suddenly come in and pay a fee so they can go to gym class, that is not the way to handle the budget problem.
Mr. Barkley?
I always feel like I'm in this default position. School fees. Let me speak to this as the chair of the Fiscal Management Committee. I mean, one of the things that we've done is we've in fact had the system come in and talk to us about how the fees are collected, how are they accounted for. What we really haven't dealt with, and we will deal with, is the issue of how then are they spent, okay? But I think I'm not ready to really speak to the legal issue, because the jury is still out, if you will, on that. But I think one of the issues is really making sure there's an issue of equity. If, in fact, we are capable of charging the fees for certain materials, ensuring that everybody has access to those materials if they can or cannot pay, and then making sure that the fees that are collected are spent appropriately. So I kind of want to stay in that general area because I think we're still working this through. I will say one thing, that the system is looking at all of the fees that are being collected and really going through and trying to make an assessment on what fees, in fact, are curriculum related and some that aren't, in putting them in categories, because there may be some decisions that in the future those fees will not be charged. So I think the board is really responding to this and looking at it and trying to figure out a way to move forward, one on the legal side, but then one on the issue of the equity side, and just really ensuring that, in fact, we're being fair to parents and students across the county.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Well, I'll agree with everything that's been said so far. I think that the legal issue is really not clear-cut. It's not an absolute in terms of what, that no fees may be charged. Having said that, I really question whether or not, as a practical matter, we should be making non-payment of these fees student obligations to the extent that if a student doesn't pay the fee, we'll withhold report cards, we'll say you can't attend prom. The different sanctions that we impose on students if the fees are not paid, I think is wrong. I think to the extent that we can charge fees, and Steve is right, I mean, if we say no fees, then courses that are more difficult and more expensive to teach, and you'll have art courses, photography classes, different types of classes that are expensive, the school system may make the choice of saying we can't afford to deliver those courses and may eliminate them from the curriculum, and I don't think that's a good outcome either. I think most parents don't really have objection to paying the fees. There hasn't been a huge outcry from parents opposed to the fees. I think that if we made them voluntary, I think most of the fees would still be paid. But I don't think it's right that we should be punishing students and sanctioning them for non-payment of these fees.
Okay. Mr. Lee, would you like to address the school fees?
Well, I think the public school by law are free to everybody. But the Constitution was written back a long time ago. And therefore, we have less money now to afford the public school. And I think the school sometimes can ask money from the parent. When my children were in Montgomery public school, we pay extra for different activity as well. We sell baking soda at football game to give it to PTA. So I think it's not the school fee, but I think somebody did want to point out the letter of the law. But that's where the difference between the heart and the brain. See, parent with the heart would say, well, if I had money, I would give it. Because I know some teacher would take money from their own pocket and buy the school material. So, and for those children with family cannot afford, we can waive them, that's like we have a free meal. Now back to the Constitution, I heard two lawyers were explaining, and the third lawyer here say, yeah, I understand, but to me, I don't. I'm an engineer. I want to be in school to teach engineering, math, science, so that our children can meet the future technological competition with other countries. Russia, China, they know math and physics and science.
Thank you.
And I have that background, and that's why I want to offer myself. And I also ask other members to give up their stipend. Bueno School Board is an honor from the community.
Thank you very much. We are, as I've said several times, on a very tight schedule this evening, and I'm looking at the clock, and I thought we'd be able to get one more question in from the audience. I will take your questions, and I will get them to the school board members, and I will get them back to you in electronic form through one of the website, or through the various websites, and I apologize that we weren't able to get to them. But as you all know, we are taping this on the night of the presidential debate, and some people up here on the dais need to get back to Rockville and probably would like to see some of that. So after we have concluded, I will take questions from the audience and we will get them to the members of the school board. But I do want to return to our initial question. I actually would like to hear one more time with as much clarity as possible what your priorities are as school board members, what your priorities will be. And those of you who are in contested races, what makes you particularly stand out? Now, I don't want any, mudslinging, or, you don't have to talk badly about, bad about your opponent, but what makes you particularly the right candidate for this position? So we'll begin with you, Mr. Abrams. We'll just move right on down.
No secret what my priority is. My priority is to protect the gains that we've made in closing the achievement gap. through the reforms initiated during the Wiest years. That means a continued optimization of budget. It means disproportionately putting class size reduction where it's needed, not where it would be liked, to make sure that those resources go and where the results justify them, to continue the efforts on our teacher training, which is extraordinarily important in bringing that about, because a contemporary workforce able to teach in a differentiated classroom is fundamental to what we need to be able to accomplish to continue our reforms.
3 words: accountability, equity, and excellence. That's it. That's what it comes down to. 3 things. The board needs to be accountable. The school system needs to be accountable to our constituents, to our customers. We need to ensure that excellence happens for every student, that the best of the best is available to every student in this county, and we need to really define what in fact is excellence. I think that's a conversation that we really haven't been having. What is excellence? What does it mean when we say rigor? What does it mean when we say we're going to ensure, that a kid is ready? If you say in 5th grade that the standard is they need to be taking 6th grade math, well, what have we done between 1st and 4th grade to ensure that our students are really ready? To do that, you have to have board members that are willing to ask the right questions. You have to have board members who are willing to hang in there, because this is not a short-term kind of thing. It's not going to happen overnight, okay? And you also need to make sure that this board, because whoever's elected possibly is going to be the board that will appoint the next superintendent, ensure that this board is moving the direction that this county wants to continue in the direction, in that trajectory, if you will, towards excellence and equity. So I'm unopposed, so, just remember to check the bottom of the box, if you will. But I really think it's important that the 3 issues are accountability, equity, and excellence.
Thank you.
I've got 4 issues that are listed quite clearly on my website, which is www.laura4.com. So I urge you to go have a look at those priorities. Clear and transparent budget, better communication, safe schools, secure schools for our kids, exercise and nutrition, and hiring a great new superintendent. Why am I the right person? We do need accountability. We need somebody in this very large bureaucracy who is willing to say, coming back to the idea of we've sprung a leak, we need to be in touch with the people who are experiencing that leak, and we need to do something about it and demand answers. I'm a parent, so I'm experiencing what our kids and parents are experiencing on a daily basis. I'm in touch, and I would be anyway, because I'm the sort of person that listens. That's an important point for me, is having people who listen and respect the people who are talking to them. I'm independent. I will not be beholden to unions. I will not be beholden to the superintendent. I'm there, in my view, to represent the customers, which is the students. And it's the students' best interest that I will consider on every issue. My background is as an attorney, so I know how to work with people. That's what I do, is I plan, help them plan for the future. I also know how to ask questions and to also disagree without being disagreeable, which is, I think, an important part. We've got 8 members of this board. We need to be able to work together to get things done. If we're going to be, just sniping, that's not going to be effective. We need to make sure that we're effective in carrying out those oversight and accountability functions that are so important to our system.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Priorities, we have to be responsible with our budget. We need to be fiscally accountable to the citizens. This is going to be an extremely trying budget to adopt this year. We know that there are huge shortfalls out there, and we need to be smarter in terms of how we spend our money to make sure that money is being spent wisely. One of the qualifications I have for the office, in addition to the fact that I'm an attorney, I also have a degree in economics from the University of Pennsylvania. I think that, my educational background, I think, is an asset for this position. Other priorities, as we indicated before, middle school reform, we have to make sure that that is done properly and smartly. Increasing parent and community involvement, that's an issue that's come up time and again. We need to do that better. The testing issue, we have to be smarter about the things that we test. Those are not my only priorities. You can see all of my priorities listed on my website, www.philkaufman.com. If you look at that website, you'll also see the many endorsements that I've received from different individuals, elected officials in the county. I've been endorsed by our different union groups. I've been endorsed most recently by the Gazette as the clear choice for the District 4 seat. Just the other day, I received the endorsement from the Montgomery County Taxpayers League. So I've got a wide range of endorsements on different sides of the spectrum. I think they see me as someone who will be independent, who will look out for the needs of all kids, and I will put children first.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Lee?
My priority is to bring basic education back to our children, especially in the elementary level, multiplication drill every day, because when they grow up, they don't have a computer on the hand. It's the brain that's what they rely on. As an engineer, I know that. The second priority, I would say that innovating, motivate the teacher to wake up our children, because know how to teach, not what to teach, but know how to teach is the key here. And I want to bring vocational back so that our immigrant community, low-income people, can have our children to have a career path. But then we also can maintain academic science for those students that can go to college. Now, I also want to point out that the reason the school board doesn't listen to the community, because they are catering to the union. They wouldn't be on the board if the union didn't put the apple cart out. So I think the community need to stand up and stand for yourself and pick the right one. I had experience, people talk about math and advanced calculus. Do they know anything about this stuff? I have a PhD in engineering. I know this stuff. We don't use anything in this workplace. I know that. We use common multiplication, subtract, addition, and that's what we need to teach. Now, tonight you see that people talk very high level. And for myself, an old Buffalo way, I bring up a lot of innovation, new idea, like, exercise class through the PA and so on. So I would say that I'm the only one had the technical know-how to teach and to guide our children to face with the future technology. Now, my opponent say he had economic and lawyer degree. Well, we had two capable lawyers. You can hear they talk real good, and this gentleman here only agreed to it. So, as an engineer, that's what you need on the board: future, energy, technology, and not lawyer.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we've come to a pause in our discussion. We'll try to continue this online. We'll get some questions to you, and we'll have the answers posted at the Montgomery Blair High School website and at Tacoma.com after October 24th, perhaps sooner on the Blair website. And I want to thank each of you for running for office. None of you are going to be making a mint on the school board. So we have to assume that that each of you is motivated by some altruism and care for the community. So thank you for doing that. And we'd like to thank the audience here tonight. Thank all of you at home for taking the time to get to know the issues a little bit. I want to thank the City of Tacoma Park and the great people at the cable station who are filming this at the moment. When Nina Garfield came to me and suggested this forum, just a couple of weeks ago. I have to admit, I didn't think that we had enough time to pull it off, and so I think that Nina Garfield deserves a great thanks for having the vision. And Susan Fleck has done tremendous heavy lifting at putting all of this together, and I think that she also deserves a lot of thanks. And with that, that concludes our evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah.